Hi, I'm James from pixelrefresh.com, and this is Game and Gadget podcast number 36. With me, I have, of course, my co-host, who is also one of the co-founders of Revolution Software. Welcome back, Tony.
Good evening.
And also I have with me, of course, Aaron Fothergill, a regular on the Game and Gadget podcast. How are you, sir?
Doing okay.
Excellent. Okay, so there's probably quite a bit to talk about, but we'll start with Tony. We met up again in person. We had a little tour of the room. We can literally see, if you're watching the video version of the podcast, behind you there. And you had some wonderful computers from what would you say, a 40-year period of time?
From yesteryear.
Yesteryear, absolutely. And the comments on YouTube have been, actually, I thought they'd be more about the Enterprise.
Yeah, no one knows what it is, I think. I mean, it's one of the best things there, but no one knows what an Enterprise is. So
I saw ads for one.
Yeah.
But the computers links was recognised quite clearly again, so I'm very excited. So I think they are begging for another more in-depth video about individual systems in the future. I'll just warn you now, Tony. But I think in terms of that retro tour itself, it was a nice overview of lots of different retro computers and consoles from the last 40 years. You've got quite an impressive collection, to say the least.
Yeah, even I was surprised at how much there was, actually, yeah.
So you had the pleasure of moving house, didn't you, as well? Well, that's it. You've had the pleasure of moving house, which means, like most people, you find things you'd forgot you even had. And in your case, a lot of that was actually retro tech, which is, one, a pleasant surprise for you, and also I get to see everything in one convenient new space you have, rather than maybe there's a box in the loft and there's a box in the garage and maybe there's a box under the stairs and one's got the power lead, one's got the controller, one's got the keyboard, and who knows how these things progress. I cleared out the garage just a couple of weeks ago and it was like, I thought I hadn't got this anymore. And it's a nice experience until you get to the end and think, where's that thing I thought I had? So there's a multitude of memories and lost nostalgia in moving house or cleaning out the garage. But thank you again for that, Tony. It was fun to visit and see all these things. This is available on YouTube on the Pixel Refresh YouTube channel if you wish to view that in more detail.
Yeah, it was a fun day.
It really was. It really was. We also went to a retro exhibition where you got another Mega Drive. Maybe you'd like to give us a bit of backstory about that, Tony, and then this new bargain Mega Drive you acquired.
Well, I mean, someone gave me a Mega Drive a long time ago, and I'd forgotten about that. But then because we're working on a gauntlet-y thing for the Specky Next at the moment. I say gauntlet-y, a bit gauntlet-y, not that gauntlet-y, but a little bit. So anyway, we thought we'd research Gauntlet. So we looked at YouTube, of course, and found out that one of the best versions of Gauntlet next to the cabinet is the Mega Drive version. And I thought, I'll play it on my Mega Drive. But that triggered a chain of spending, should we say, a chain of spending events, which started with buying the actual game itself for 30 quid on a cartridge. But then I needed, what did I need? I needed a power supply. I needed a video lead. I needed a HDMI OSSC device.
Close. OSSC.
I needed one of those. And then, I got all of those things and thought it was going to work, and it didn't work at all. So then I got another. I got another. We thought the Mega Drive was broken, didn't we? So at the show we went to, I bought another for 15 quid. 15 quid Mega Drive. I thought it was too good to not buy it anyway. So I bought the second Mega Drive thinking it was the Mega Drive that was broken, but it turned out to be something else that was broken. Not on the Mega Drive at all. So then I got another video lead, and it still didn't work, even though the Mega Drives appeared to work with the other game that came with one of them, Mortal Kombat. So then you told me to clean the cartridges, which I did clean, and then it eventually worked on one of the Mega Drives. So after all of that, it does. I have actually got Gauntlet running on a Mega Drive, but it was a long and sorry process.
So Tony, in a nutshell there, described what it's like to get into retro authentic hardware, trying to get it to run on a modern television, and also diagnosing a problem, which isn't always the most straightforward of things because you've got so many angles to look at it. And then all of this after you'd already got the emulator running with Gauntlet.
Oh yeah, the emulator was very easy. It took about...
I mean, that's one of the things, isn't it? It's like you spend 15 quid on a Mega Drive and like 100 quid on bits and dongles and leads to connect it up to anything.
More than that, I think I'm well the other side of 200 quid actually to get this thing going. Wow. But mainly because the OSSC was it was 150 quid, so that was quite an expensive thing. But it's also a very good thing and does all sorts of. It's very useful for all sorts. So I don't regret buying that at all. In fact, it's a really, really great thing. So I'm very pleased about having that. And all my other stuff now, I'm now buying. I'm now realizing that a lot of this stuff that I showed you, I don't have power supplies for it, and I don't have video leads for it. So I'm now buying power supplies and video leads, mostly 15 quid a shot, for all these other things to see what will work and what won't work. But I can be pretty sure that if it's plugged into the OSSC, then I'm going to get a picture on the telly. So that's good.
If the computer or console supports RGB, yes,
but not a SNES.
SNES does support RGB. It's the N64 that doesn't. Not that out of the box, anyway.
Oh, okay. And
I don't think have you got an N64 anyway?
There's big warnings on these things saying not Nintendo, not Nintendo.
It depends. But I mean, I've literally just you're in my world now of buying. There's a £15 lead there. There's a £10 lead there. There's a universal power supply. Oh, this has got a priority report. We need to get something specific for that. But yeah, the SNES. I literally just got a decent SCART cable, which is RGB equipped, and it looks stunning compared to what would be RF plugging straight into the aerial port of a TV. They didn't look that great back in the day, but you most likely didn't know any better. And there was a lot less interference back then. Now things like Wi-Fi's and cats, this causes a lot of problems.
Yeah.
There's a cat on screen. I'll just point it out for those listening to the audio.
I don't. He's one of my brother's cats. I'm still looking after him.
And that's how it starts.
He's a bit of a screen diva.
Evidently. Well, I'm glad you've got retro hardware enthusiast of a cat. That's good to know that he thought it was worth popping in.
Retro hardware and cats goes together because retro hardware is usually warm and nice to sit on.
This is also very true. But yeah, it's certainly a journey going on retro console or computer hardware, and I hope, Tony, you'll persevere and stick with it, because now, as you say, you've got your OSSC, which is a great upscaler. So for taking those lower resolutions and trying to put that natively through a TV, even if the TV had SCART, it would look pretty trash.
Yeah. I don't think anyone makes a TV with a SCART port on it now anyway. So
this is very, very true.
Certainly
so
not.
You've got the benefit of having those beautiful pixels preserved and scaled to 1080p, 1440p-ish. And it's just buying a cable for pretty much every device you own. That's the bit that hurts.
Yeah. Well, I saw today actually a Computers Links RGB cable, so to SCART of all things. So I'll probably buy one of those and see if that machine still boots, as you mentioned it.
And there we go. There's another cable. So we don't even know if the machine works, but we're going to spend, what, £10, £15 on another cable?
15 quid on the cable.
There you go.
But the amount of time, if it doesn't work, the amount of time you save messing around with it, trying to get it to do other things other than switching on, it's worth the 15 quid.
There you go. Speak to Aaron. He'll support you. But yes, the retro journey, as I say, is a fun and can be quite an expensive one. So for those who balk at the price of a Mr. FPGA, which tends to sit around the £350, £400 mark, compared to buying all these different cables, the OSSC and all these other things, it soon pays for itself in that sense, as long as you're okay with FPGA instead of having like, I think on the consoles, it's easier to forgive. But when you're on the computers, then it's a harder situation because you want the actual keyboard layout that provides. That's my thought anyway. And that's how I went down this blinking rabbit hole of, I need a computer because I've got quite a few consoles. Now I'd like a computer, and I start with an Atari ST. Somehow ended up with 2 Amigas. I'm not even sure how that happened, both A500. I think I was sorry for one of them because it looked pretty beat up. And the other one was a much nicer version, which has now got, not Pi-hole, what's the thing of it? Pi-Storm, where you plug a Raspberry Pi into it to boost the CPU performance. So you literally replace the CPU. And then I saw a computer I got rid of many years ago, the Acorn Archimedes A3010, which for those watching the video is behind me, looking rather naked with the top off because I've been trying to sort out the floppy drive on it. But yeah, money, money, money. I won't say any further because of copyright strikes and those who will want to mute me. But other than that, yes, welcome aboard the fun retro ride, Tony.
Yep. Thanks.
And think, it could be worse. It could be cars. If it's retro cars, just take all the money you're spending on computers and like add a 0 on the end at least, or a couple of zeros.
Yeah. Actually, there's always a way to justify things, isn't there? And there are more expensive things than this stuff. So it's cheap and a bargain,
Yeah, and of course, if you are like us, if you're writing games for a living, you need to have all this retro stuff for research. Especially given the style of stuff both of us have worked on. So it's theoretically tax deductible as research.
And that is Aaron Fothergill's counselling message for 2024 of your retro addiction.
Financial advice.
That is absolutely correct, though. It is not certainly one of the most expensive. I guess it depends what your fascination in retro hardware is. So, for example, the 3DOs will be like a really nice thing to have in my collection, but well out to my price range of what I would consider a nice bargain purchase to add. The same will go for something like the Atari Jaguar because it's like a curiosity. That was Atari's last console, if you look at Atari as we think of Atari.
I wish I hadn't learned about the Atari Jaguar. I want one so much now.
You've got one?
Oh, no, not an Atari ST. Sorry, Atari. Yeah, I've got one of those. I mean the Atari ST. What's it called?
The ST520.
The Falcon.
The Falcon. Oh no.
Yeah, the Falcon was the dev kit for the Jaguar as well. So
the Falcon is what I want.
If you've got a Jaguar, there's a good excuse to get a Falcon.
Yeah. Now I've got Atari Falcon on the mind. I mean, they're so nice. But Mike, have you seen the price of them?
I haven't. No, they've gone back up again.
A couple of £1,000.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean there weren't that many out there.
No, that's the reason.
So yeah, they any that's still working, and I don't think you can even just do the drop it an inch trick to fix them either, like the Atari ST. Yeah.
So, Aaron, you've given us a fantastic pitch for collecting retro hardware in the development space. So what sort of collection do you have?
Most of my retro stuff doesn't work because I kind of collect it on the basis of I would like to play with this again, but I haven't got time. But I do have the first computer I ever owned still, which is a Banana 2 Apple II clone. It's very, very heavily modified because when I got it, I've been programming for a few years already by that point, but I'd never owned my own computer because we couldn't afford one, and finally managed to get this. Basically, a Banana 2 Plus because it was the Apple II Plus, so 48K, 1 megahertz, 6502. And it had a few bits and pieces of tweaks on it, like a PAL card and stuff like that. But over the 3 years I was in Hong Kong, I was able to buy knockoff boards of all sorts for it. And one of the usual problems with those, as soon as you put a few boards in, is the cooling becomes an issue. So I buy the fan box that you can put on the side that was pretty common for most of the Apple IIs. And that wasn't enough, so I had cut a hole in the side to actually get the air flowing through. yeah, I did my own ROMs for it, and eventually and stuff like that, because you can buy EEPROM burners, and so I did my own ROMs, and basically I learned a lot of useful stuff on that before I came back to the UK, and I kept it. I still got a couple of the cards. I think I've still got the PAL card, but there's a couple of wires have been cut somewhere, so I don't think it displays. It does boot, doesn't display, but I don't have any floppy drives for it anymore. I got rid of my floppy drives. I actually, annoyingly, one of the various moves I did when I was in the UK, I had to move around a lot. I lost 2 boxes of all my original Apple II programming discs of all the early games I'd done on those, along with my floppy drives and a lot of other stuff in the box I'd left with a friend while sorted out storage somewhere else. And he got divorced and moved, and I think his ex-wife dumped everything of his and so on, which included my stuff. So I unfortunately lost those. But yeah, if they didn't end up in a skip somewhere, if anyone does find a bunch of Apple II floppy disks with one thing with names like the Ace and I can't remember what some of the other ones are on there. There's a few different ones I've been messing around with. Then get in touch. But I suspect they went straight to landfill, which is the fate, unfortunately, of a lot of stuff.
So what's the advantage of redoing the ROMs yourself then?
Right, way back. One of the biggest advantages for most people, one of the reasons that everyone was sold on the EEPROM card at the time, was this is in the days of the early clones. This isn't where people are claiming to have reverse engineered to make their IBM PC clones. What happened in Hong Kong was they basically took the chips and just duplicated it, because everything was relatively standard chips and it was easy to duplicate. And they weren't exactly worried about copyright over there, and patents and stuff. So they just mass duplicated it. And kind of expat kids like me could actually now buy a cheap computer and so on. But one of the problems was they weren't allowed to have the bit where it says Apple II come up at the top of the screen on boot up. Because if they did that, it's a bit like Nintendo did with their logo on the ROMs. They could then claim copyright on that chip and send all the customs and excise people in and raid your little shop that's selling them. So no one ever sold them with Apple II. They always said something else, like mine was Banana 2 Plus and stuff like that. But to run things like the first word processors that came out, you had to have, they all looked for Apple II in the ROM. So one of the first things you did, once the EEPROM programmers came out, was modify the ROM just to change that bit. So it got rid of that sort of unusual copy protection that was there. It was a very, very strange time.
Sounds it. Well, in terms of strange, even modern day can be very strange. My wife was looking on AliExpress, and for less than £1, gentlemen, £1, she got me this. So for those, again, listening to the audio version, it's a small portable 4x3 screen, very Game Boy looking, single speaker, D-pad, X, Y, A, B buttons, start and select, little blue handheld, which plays 8-bit machines. There's 500 games built in, and for less than £1, I bet that was including delivery. There's no way they got their money out of this. So there must be.
They do, because of course it is now a GPS locator for the next incoming missile.
That's very reassuring. Thank you. You were so positive earlier. Anyway,
it's not on your Wi-Fi, is it?
No Wi-Fi. This thing. Good luck. No, it's. I mean, it feels cheap. There's no doubt honestly, about that.
Check it's not on your Wi-Fi.
Well, I will open this up at some point anyway, because I plan to do a little video on what you could, in theory, get for less than £1, including postage. It must have cost them more than that to actually send this thing. Well, I'm guessing the idea is you sell lots at a very cheap rate, hopefully get some nice positive reviews, and that'll help the next 10,000 sell, and so on and so forth. So that's got to be the thinking behind it. There's no way they're going to sell this under £1 constantly. But she just got in there very quick, and I just thought it was quite funny that she managed to get something that does actually function. It looks okay, it sounds okay, as long as you're okay with some 8-bit 500-in-1, possibly many duplicate games in there, ones you've never heard of, titles. But less than £1, come on. I thought that was pretty clever. Beat that.
And it probably doesn't. It probably eats batteries less than an old Game Boy did as well.
But this even makes me smile even more because it doesn't say insert 2 AA batteries or anything like this. It's literally got a rechargeable battery in it.
Oh, nice. Right, yeah.
Which again is probably worth more than the less than £1 that was paid for it. That little door hatch to reveal the battery is probably worth 20p on its own. But there we go. There's some clever folks out there creating stuff en masse that, it's intriguing. And it can even plug into a TV. But I've not tried that yet. But there we go. A portable handheld for less than £1, which would mean you could get 15 of those for one of Tony's retro cables. And I can say that because Tony and I have been doing exactly the same blinking thing. My Atari ST has an RGB. Yeah. Atari ST has an RGB cable. My Acorn Archimedes has an RGB cable. My Amiga has an RGB cable. My Mega Drive, my SNES.
Oh, the ST video cables. Remember that? It's that weird 13-pin thing,
yes,
or whatever at the back. The weird thing with that was, way back again, I'd been using ST for a while. I was using my ST through a TV because I couldn't afford to get a monitor. So typically it was just done through a TV. So I never had one of those cables. And those cables usually came with the monitor. And then I bought an Akai sampler, an X7000. And Akai, in all their wisdom, had done very strange 2.6-inch floppy drives, which were these weird little things called quick drives. And that I think might have been used elsewhere on one thing, but that was about it. So the discs were hard to get. And the coolest thing it had was it had a breakout DIN socket on the back that allowed you to basically take pinouts and do a lot of really cool extra control stuff from it, except it was basically the same DIN plug as on the Atari monitor cable. And they were so hard to get as just cable. Yeah.
So what other... You say you've got your first, which is great. Because what would have been my first?
So I've got another one that I got to use myself was my G4 Cube. I loved the styling of it. It was great. It had a horrific flaw in that it came with no USB extension lead, and you kind of want this thing on your desk, but all the USB ports are underneath and come out through a very stylish gap in the back, so that you don't see.
Sounds very Apple
weird
already.
shapes. It's very, very cool looking. But the problem is, if you've got a normal Apple mouse with a relatively short mouse lead, by the time the leads come out the back and your keyboard leads come out the back, your keyboard and the mouse are right up to it. So I rang Apple up after it arrived, and I said, this didn't come with an extension lead for the mouse. You know, if you don't send me an extension lead, I'm sending it back because it's practically useless. You know, you can't run it with a mouse on it. So they sent me an extension lead. But it was really rather good. I modified it quite a bit. I upped the hard drive. I modified the hard drive in it and put a third-party one in to increase it. I think I even sped mine up a bit. But I wrote the original Airburst on there. And I think I did rather a lot of Toy Sight on there as well. So I did quite a lot of stuff on that one. And this was while I was at Argonaut at the time. So it was my go-to machine when I got home. I was using an iBook at work for my work machine. I loved that. So I kept that, and I kept the monitor. And again, at the time, annoyingly, I couldn't afford to get this nice thin LCD screen that doesn't weigh 500 tons. I had to get the 17-inch CRT monitor that every time I move it, I swear at it because it weighs a ton and it's really awkward balance as well. All the weight's at the back, so It is just a pain in the neck to move around, and it's got a wonderfully stylish, curvy base that won't sit straight on anything unless it's a big enough space, and and it's just like, oh God, but again, it was I can't remember the specific lead. It was ADI or something like that. It was Apple experimented with new leads, which was a precursor to HDMI. So RGB wasn't good enough, basically, for the stuff they were chucking out. So they started on this new one. Eventually, it morphed into what became HDMI, but it went through a couple of variants that kind of were only Apple were daring to use, kind of thing, which is really annoying when you want to actually connect anything else to it later on, which is why I've hung on to the monitor. But it does look beautiful. Yeah, when it runs, you've got this beauty. It's a beautiful CRT, Unfortunately, the speakers for it, the rubber in the speaker surround has decayed, so the speakers don't work. You get these really nice Bang & Olufsen speakers with it and everything, and it's like they look great, but they're a bit knackered now, unfortunately. But that one still works at least, so that's good. I'm not sure what version of macOS is on it, but it's quite an old one.
So what inspired you into computers and development? I mean, in terms of, was this your parents brought you a computer, or they had a computer themselves that you were able to use? How did this all begin?
Oh, very easy. Basically, it was a Skive. I had a friend who was a year ahead of me at school. He was a year older, and I got to, back then you got to the end of your third year in secondary school. I'm not quite sure what that equates to nowadays in the current years, but basically you get told, right, next year you're going to be doing O-levels. You have to pick what options of what subjects you want to do for the next 2 years. And I didn't know because, I was fairly good at maths and I liked science and stuff, And my mates, you've got to do computer studies. You've got to do computer studies. It's an absolute skive. All we do is we play computer games in the classroom, and then we go out on field trips to places where they have proper computers, and because this is early 80s, and we don't do any work at all. It's great. It's brilliant. Oh, that's the option for me, So I put that one down, and that was just at the time my dad got posted. So going from there, picking my options to when I actually started, I'd actually moved school. So luckily we had slightly better computers in the classroom, and a couple of pets in the classroom, and a terminal linked to Farnborough Tech. And of course, yes, we did do a field trip to Farnborough Tech within the first week I was there. So, but and it just happened that having actually being put in front of one of these things and having a go at it, it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. This is fun. Yeah.
What about you, Tony? How did yours sort of start?
Well, I don't want to go over the old story of my battles with the school again, because everyone's probably heard that a million times. But I don't know. My friends and I were looking at electronics as something interesting to do, but it's quite difficult, electronics. And then at the same slightly later, the ZX81 started appearing, and a friend of mine got one. And 5 minutes into having a look at a ZX81, and you suddenly realise this is A, a lot more interesting than electronics, and B, considerably easier. So you don't spend ages building something that doesn't work. You can do a bit of typing and a bit of editing, and Bob's your uncle. You've got something interesting. So it just like from that, it just like snowballed, really, I suppose. Then I did my paper round, saved some money, and bought that Lynx thing, Computers Lynx, and took it from there, really.
Now I feel ashamed of myself because you two both have your first, and I do not. So I would have gone from Pong, then to the Atari 2600, but it was the junior version, which was quite a bit smaller. And then the biggest inspiration, I think, of all of them was actually the Atari 65XC, which I believe was based on the 400, but it looked more like the ST in terms of style. The 400 and 800, these big boxes. Where you'd stick
the 400 and the 800 were loosely based on the Apple II.
They were big. They were definitely big. In fact, there's a 400 Mini to sort of enjoy that sort of range of games. But the Atari 65XE, still 8-bit, but it was inspired by the design of the ST. So it looked more like a computer. You had a proper keyboard. Tape deck was separate. And there were some great games on it, and I really enjoyed playing them. And it was that because, of course, it had BASIC. So I could dabble a little bit. And this was back in the day when you got a manual with a computer, it would actually tell you how to program it, essentially. You'd get some basic programs you could type out, spend half an hour typing it up and realise there must be a character wrong somewhere because it hasn't run properly. Or worst case scenario, oh no, there was actually a typo that they printed, but that's another story for another day. But anyway, in terms of the Atari 65XE, that was probably what got me into the whole, it was a flexible system. The Atari 2600, you stick your cartridge in, you play your game. Okay, and then you stick another cartridge in and play that game. Where the Atari was a computer, you felt like you could do a lot more with it. And that was probably what inspired my, dare I say, geeky nature to get into this whole computer world when it still wasn't like the mainstream thing. It was still a bit of a niche until I got to sort of end of my school career. And that's when, my school was full of Acorn Archimedes. So they were only just starting to transfer to PCs, IBM compatibles. But when I got to college, that's when they were saying, if you do computers, you've got a job for life. There's plenty of jobs out there for doing computers. 3 years later, once I did all my qualifications, there were no jobs available for computers. You just kept going not further and further down the ladder until you're doing something incredibly basic like data input, which was actually, funny enough, one of my first jobs, entering credit card applications into a system, about 120 of them a day. That was living the life for £5 an hour, that was. But still, it was an interesting experience until I finally got a position working with my auntie and a family friend who taught me PCB assembly. So I did that for 6 months, and that was a lot of fun. So I got to experience through the Atari, the computers, and the Acorn Archimedes, exactly the same after that. And then I got to see the other side of how they put together in PCB assembly. So it was a nice sort of introduction to this whole world of computers and games and applications and how they all sit. And then, of course, the internet came along, and that opened up a whole new dimension in itself of what was possible. Winamp. Who can't forget Winamp? In GeoCities.
So working for your auntie, you're basically a Nepo baby then.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you still using ICQ? Because there's some bad news about that.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
I haven't used ICQ in years, but I could probably tell you what my 8-digit username ID is. But yeah, bye-bye ICQ, which has managed to cling on for a very long time, considering Yahoo Messenger, MSN Messenger, obviously bit the dust a long time ago. I believe AOL Messenger went a long time ago as well.
Yeah, Microsoft rolled it into something else. Right?
Skype somehow's lingering on in existence.
Although Skype, I haven't used it in a while, but they were gradually making it as bad as possible each time you used it. They seem to be deliberately making it like let's lose that pixel there this week, and then next week we'll lose that pixel, and then that bit of audio quality will go, and it just got worse and worse and worse because I think they're desperately trying to make everyone shift over to Teams.
It's like a Jenga with an app.
You like this feature, dear? Oh, I'll just pull that block.
What line can we remove without? Actually, that would be a bit. I mean, way back. Lots of this week is way back. But one of the fun games as a programmer was Code War, where you've got a block of memory and a block of code, and basically an opponent is doing something. You're basically trying to attack your opponent's block of code and get to a specific point, and so on. And essentially, you're writing code to try and attack his code, and he's writing code to try and attack your code, and so on. All very fun and cool and everything. But code Jenga could be rather fun. You basically have a bunch of code. You set anyone's program, and you get it, and you basically right. Does it run? Right, it runs. And then each of you gets to take one line out of code each turn until it breaks.
Patent it before I publish this.
Yeah.
Well, that just also shows how complex code is that a line can literally bring it all crushing to its knees and it doesn't load at all.
Mm.
So when you guys talk about development, there's a whole level of complication which verbally you could probably never share to the average viewing audience, because you'd need to know what exactly is going on character by character, line by line.
It's understanding, some of it's understanding, like, for instance, if you're playing code Jenga, and if you understand the overall code, it's like, yeah, I know that line, I know what that line does, but no one will notice if it's gone, which is the thing. The program will still run. It won't technically be correct because something will be missing somewhere, but it's obscure enough that no one will spot it, you know. But also back to the type-in listings, this being a classic problem, one thing wrong breaks the whole thing. And one of the classic problems is if you're writing one of these type-in listings, it works fine for you, and it will potentially work fine for everybody, but then you have to send it off to be published in the magazine. And in the earlier magazines, that was manually typeset by people who don't know anything about programming or computers in general. And of course, they're just seeing a bunch of gibberish, and they've got to by hand copy it into typesetting machines. And even with desktop publishing, you know, in fact, that was actually worse. I wrote for the first issue of the Amos Club magazine, which was like an issue 0 that came out with Amos. I wrote a 10-liner game. I can't remember which one it was, probably using one of the characters I'd done for the games I'd written for Amos. But I wasn't publishing it. It was all being published in-house by Mandarin, who were publishing Amos. So they said, yeah, send us the program, and we'll put it in. And they sent it off to their desktop publishing guys, and it didn't lay out nicely on the page, and they didn't want to have another page, obviously, because this was a freebie little magazine they were giving out. So they took a line out. So the 10-liner game had 9 lines, and of course didn't work.
Oh dear.
Yeah, because from their point of view, it's just, we just make it look nice. It's gibberish anyway, so you know, who cares, you know.
Bless them.
Yeah.
Oh man, we've come a long way.
Yeah. So no, yeah. If you're doing type-in listing, if you're always swearing at type-in listings for having typos and stuff, remember, it's not the guy writing the program's fault. Probably, it's more than likely some you know, oik with a typesetting machine.
It's before it started the Chinese whispers.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Is it intriguing though how it started with some code in a book or a magazine that you'd manually type in, to magazine tapes and discs and CDs where you get demos and driver updates, full games. I mean, when I had Commodore 64, it was great because there'd be magazines and you literally get 5 new games each month when the magazine came out. It's like, do I really need to buy a game? The magazine for a few quid has all these games on it. It's great. And that's one way of building up your library. And then CDs, which were even more feature-packed, but then the internet blew all that away, which probably also helped kill a lot of the magazine market, because the disc you used to get on the front, there was no point. You just get it online, and the most up-to-date version. And when you're talking about drivers, having the most up-to-date version could mean a game runs incredibly well to a game crashes, which is obviously not a good experience. So that transition from manually typing all the way up to the age of the internet, and now we're in the world of you buy something digitally and it'll auto-update, or even worse, it may even disappear from your library in existence. So do we really truly own anything anymore? That's the scary bit.
Well, the scary bit is the oncoming of the AI stuff, where it's like, oh, I want to play this game, and the AI writes it for you rather than actually giving it the actual version of it. So it's what the AI thinks is that game, and you know.
But a weird thought is, which I hadn't contemplated either, fair enough, okay, it's a license to play the game, but also it means hopefully many distant years to come, when I do pass on through the white gates and everything, I can't pass on that content to anyone else. I can't say, hey son, here's my library of games which I've brought off Steam, and here's my films I've brought off Apple. Here's my music I brought, all so on and so forth. All that will be gone.
Well, the Apple stuff, thanks to what's his face from Bruce Willis. That was it. Bruce Willis willed his Apple music library to his kids. And Apple said, no, you can't do that. And Bruce Willis went to court and said, yes, I bloody well can. So apparently you can. There are ways, basically,
okay.
as long as you're a famous film star. But
I've still got time.
Yeah, there is a point though about the whole other people not being able to play this great thing that you used to play. And I have it's more about an art thing, but generally speaking, art that disappears can be spectacularly good because you basically experience it, you see it, you've seen this wonderful piece of art, and then you telling it to when you tell other people about it, it's always wonderful. You don't ever go back to it and look at it and go, oh, actually, no, that's a bit rubbish, which retro gaming is always that risk. If you go back to an old retro game that you loved as a kid and it's like, oh God, no.
Did it really
play
the
gameplay is terrible,
Yeah.
Or how on earth did I ever, this gives me a migraine or whatever, and I think not being able to go back and play some of these is sometimes it's a really good thing.
Ewan Fothergill there, basically upsetting every retro archivist. We preserve everything.
There's a difference between appreciating the art and, if you're a retro archivist, having a complete collection, which is a different thing altogether.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that hurts, which again I wouldn't have contemplated years ago, my original Xbox, once that got connected to Xbox Live, the games would often get patched. So it would download a patch and, again, usual stuff. It improved performance, maybe had some new gameplay modes, etc., etc., etc. With that service now no longer available on the original Xbox, that means even though I've got the original Xbox, even though I've got the game, I put that game in, it'll always be that very first print of the game on the disc without any patches whatsoever, unless you get really clever and start looking really hard on the internet, get stuff onto the hard drive, and so on and so forth. So there's not just the game you've got to worry about, it's the patches for the game. And this is probably more difficult in the console space than it is something like the PC space, where it's more freely available. And then you got all the DLC. If I had a racing game and I could buy extra tracks, or it's Rock Band and I can buy extra music, so on and so forth, how do I get it back? If I connect my Xbox 360 in a few more years and go, right, I want to play Rock Band The Beatles, which, by the way, was great for the Xbox 360, and it came with a nice selection of tracks, but you could buy a lot more in DLC, a lot more. How am I going to get those?
Well, it's the interesting thing there that even if they'd actually kept the patches and updates going, with music stuff, you probably still wouldn't be able to play it. There used to be a really, really funny comedy series called WKRP in Cincinnati, which is about a radio station with wacky, DJs and stuff like that, around the same time as Night Court in the 70s and so on. And one of the wonderful things about it that made it all just so good was the music they licensed was actual rock music at the time. So watching it back then was brilliant. And then it got re-released on DVD, and everyone's like, the actual, because it was horrible. Because unfortunately, with most music licensing, you only license it for a number of years. And of course, by the time they'd rebooted it re-released it on DVD, the licenses had all run out. So they had to replace all the original tracks with generic music that they could quickly, cheaply get a license for.
Yeah,
and this is the same problem with games. I did music licensing for Tiny Tracks, which was a game I did in 2015. That runs out next year. I mean, fortunately, the game itself isn't available directly anymore. But if I wanted to re-release it, I would actually have to go and relicense the music for it or get some different music for it. And it's the same with Rock Band. They've only licensed the music for so many years. So technically, any Rock Band stuff, even if they kept it going, unless they've spent a lot of money to renew licenses or done ridiculously long licenses, you're looking at, you flip up Rock Band and all of a sudden all the music is like, lift music.
Oh dear. But licensing is fun, and certainly there's a lot of re-releases of games that maybe have been remastered where the original music isn't the same. I think there was a remake at one point of Crazy Taxi, and there was I think it was an Offspring song or something that was in the original, which everyone remembers Crazy Taxi for. But no, that can't be in it because it can't be licensed anymore. It'd be too expensive to do, or whatever reason that would be. So yeah, it does kill the vibe of a game, because if it's that one key song that you associate with that title, is it the same game anymore? Does it give you that same nostalgia hit? Probably not. So yeah, as we get older, folks, this is going to get harder and harder and harder and more difficult. So for those people who are archiving all these patches and things in particular, keep going, because if we really want to truly appreciate, like I say, an original Xbox game, you want the latest patch that would have been made available at the time, so you can get the full version of it that's got as many bug fixes and enhancements as possible. Not necessarily the original, which was, if it's anything, imagine now how big day one patches are on a big console AAA title. Usually day one there's a 40 gigabyte patch. Imagine playing it in 20 years' time, not having the day one patch. It might be absolutely hideous. But that's what the possibility of what we would face.
That's only because they're shipping development alphas.
This is probably also true. There's something to be said for simplicity, and although there are some really good AAA titles out there, this constant push to hit that high limit all the time for a lot of publishers and developers.
There's also the shift from it being ridiculously difficult to patch on consoles, if not impossible. Like if it was back in the days when it was a cartridge, you wouldn't, and no internet, you didn't do a patch. It was a recall or nothing if it was that bad, And then on Xbox 360, for instance, we were allowed to do a fixed number of patches over the lifetime of the game, and each one cost us a lot of money if we were going to do them. So, and of course, they were limited in size as well. It was the other thing. So you had to consider very carefully whether it was worth doing a patch or not. So the game had to work when it went out, because it would be too expensive to patch it potentially. Whereas that got more and more. It's just a port of the PC version. We'll just do the same as the PC and just chuck new stuff on it as it comes along, And that's more as internet's been more practical to use for consoles as well,
It reminds me a little bit about Xbox Live Arcade on the Xbox 360, which actually came first on the original Xbox. You'd get a disc, and it had a select few games on it. Bejeweled was, I think, one of them that was knocking about on there. But then the Xbox 360 made that as digital downloads, and there were little bite-size games.
I wrote one of the first ones on Xbox 360. Well, yeah. Although we had to do it in secret because when Xbox 360 came out, this is just after Adam and I had left Argonaut to do Startup Strange Flavor. We've been doing that a couple of years, but we were known at that point for being, writing Mac games, and Toy Sight was our big, Apple Design Award winner and stuff. So it was a camera game. And for the 360, Microsoft wanted a camera game. They were developing the Kinect camera, but that was going to be a little while on. So they were going to release a little kind of webcam kind of thing as an option for it.
Xbox
and they wanted
some.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And they wanted some fun, interactive network games and stuff that you could use with the camera. Just basic stuff. They didn't want anything too clever, but they wanted a few things. But they also wanted a camera controlled one, like we'd done for Toy Sight. So they approached us and said, "Can you do some games for us?" And we said, "Yeah, sure. If the money's good." And it's like, "Oh yeah, the money is very good. So yeah, we'll do that." They took us out to Seattle, showed us all the stuff that was going on, gave us 2 dev kits, which was really good because EA only had one EA UK only had 1 dev kit, and they were complaining about the fact they only had a dev kit for all their teams. And me and Adam were there with 2. It's like. So we started, and we did a couple of games for the launch of the camera. And then we started off on other stuff. So it was very interesting playing around with the 360 as it was in development. It was but it also meant when you're an Xbox, back then when you're an XBLA developer, you also were kind of not expected to, but you were asked if you could test all the other XBLA games in development. So I got a good couple of bug reports in on Braid, for instance, when that was being developed. I managed to break it a couple of times. And we'd all be playing each other's games as they're in development, which is a very nice way of getting extra testing in.
Funnily enough, for some reason, I was also sent, this was the days when I used to have an Xbox website. I was sent an Xbox 360 the day before it was actually released in the UK, including a debug unit. So, just like you, I could get into that setup, get online, and you get all these different games you could try, which would be like Xbox Live Arcade games. And if you're very lucky, you get this, what you think, what's this game title? It's a bit odd. And then all of a sudden you'd be playing GoldenEye. So that was intriguing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, yeah. When we were working with Freeverse at the time, and one of Freeverse's guys nearly got us all in big trouble, because he was very new, junior guy who didn't understand the concept of an NDA. And of course, when you're working on something like Xbox, Live Arcade or anything like that, you're under a very serious NDA. At the time, to not talk about anything you see on it. And he sat there in the office and go, "Oh, we can play all these different games that are in development that aren't released yet," and goes off and blogs about these cool games that you can play if you're a developer. And of course, our producer at Microsoft blew his top. I was very, very cross, because that's the sort of thing that can lose you the deal. And fortunately, Freeverse were able to, have a very polite chat with Microsoft, and not a very polite chat with this junior developer, and sort it all out. So Microsoft were very, very good and forgiving with us on that one. But that could have ended very, very badly. Yeah.
Well, luckily, that has a happy ending. And in terms of Tony's retro spending, we'll keep a tally. And the next podcast will say much more Tony has spent.
You want one of those thermometer charts at the back behind you, don't you? Of the amount.
Instead of Tony has raised, Tony has spent exploding
$1 million at the top.
Yeah. It's like Tony in need.
Yeah. If you'd like to help Tony or other people
dial
like him,
0800 RGB.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about those. You got me into those Mister things. I'm looking at them now.
Oh, no.
They got to be good, haven't they?
Look, you've got to stop blaming me for these things. Look, because you blame me for the Ambernic, you blame me for the OSSC, but at least you've admitted the OSSC is a good bit of kit.
It is a good thing.
There we go.
It's a good thing.
And I think the FPGA, the Mr. FPGA, which there is actually now, it looks like there's going to be a much cheaper FPGA board to go with the Mr. FPGA project. So instead of £240 for the DE10 Nano, it could be around £100, which is a nice considerable drop. And James may actually be able to afford one at some point in the near future if he didn't keep buying now a Sega Mega Drive 2 with a Mega CD2 connected to it. But that's a story and a video for another day.
Get them to sponsor Pixel Refresh, and then you can get a free one.
Look, I am on Ko-fi. We accept donations in terms of physical hardware, and maybe one day it'll also feature in a video. But generally, I don't expect anything donated, because I'll be honest, my 5,000 plus subscribers on YouTube for the Pixel Refresh gaming channel isn't a lot. I have to plead with the YouTube algorithm to get noticed on these things, and it's a pain. I've got to regularly release videos now to build it back up again, because it was doing really well. And then unfortunately, no offense, gentlemen, the Game and Gadget podcast tanked it. But that's my fault, because these videos tend to be about an hour long. And engagement for an hour-long video is really hard to maintain at the best of times. And podcasting, they may click onto it because they've seen a subject in the summary. They'll fast forward, listen or watch that bit, and then maybe disappear. For YouTube, that is terrible because it means they're not engaged with the whole length of the percentage of the video.
We need to work out ways to do very clickbaity 5-minute shorts for each section of the video.
Well, look, less than £1 portable Chinese handheld. It's got to be the thumb for this one, and maybe Tony's head exploding when he sees his credit card bill. Yeah.
I can be the thumbnail, can't I? Going.
And I can take the snapshot from that now. Well, thank you guys. Always a pleasure. And we'll see you next time on the Game and Gadget podcast.
Cheers.
Cheers.